Welcome to the Weekly Leadership Experience, a place for leaders to get inspired, be challenged, and grow. I am your host, Rashad Oberlander. Let's get started. Today's episode of the Weekly Leadership Experience is brought to you by my 7-day Leadership Growth Challenge. It's a free challenge that I've created, and it's delivered by email over the course of 7 days. I've created 7 compelling questions to challenge various aspects of your leadership, the way you lead, and why you lead. Go to rashadoberlander.com and scroll down until you find the 7-day leadership challenge, or look for the link in the show notes. And now, on with the show. Here's a review from Kash Lawani over on the Stitcher platform for 5 stars. Excellent podcast presentation with an invitingly fresh choice of subject matters, metaphors, references, and clearly understandable. We'll recommend to just about anyone because it's not just about workplace leadership, but family, community, group, and obviously very beneficial as a personal growth reflection. What a wonderful review. Thanks for taking the time out to leave me that message. I really appreciate it. And if you're listening to this and you'd like to leave me a review, you can do this by going to ratethispodcast.com/weekly leader. And it will allow you to select the app that you prefer to be able to leave a review. And it's really important because your feedback helps me to improve the show, boosts my morale, and most importantly, helps others to find out about the show. So go ahead and do that. Once again, that website is ratethispodcast.com/weekly leader. And now, on with the show. Hello and welcome to this week's show. I'm here today with Beth Miller, CEO, Leadership Development Advisor, author, and speaker at Executive Velocity. Beth's work at Executive Velocity focuses on leadership development and succession planning and is committed to building and strengthening your leadership pipeline through coaching, custom training, and assessments. In her ebook, Are You Talent Obsessed?, Beth shares her dedication to continued learning as well as her clients' personal and professional growth. Beth is certified in Myers-Briggs, Hogan, EQI, and Business DNA, and is a certified managerial coach through Kennesaw University. In the current global environment, Beth is helping her clients address challenges in leadership during the pandemic, emotional intelligence, and hiring great people. Beth, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much, Rashad. I've really been looking forward to this.
Me too, Beth. I'm really pleased to have you here. Thanks for taking the time to chat with me today.
Oh, it's a pleasure.
Awesome. So just get started and tell us a little bit more about yourself and what you're up to.
Yeah, so I have been executive coach for now, almost 15 years, and working with leaders, senior leaders, and business owners. So I do a lot of work in those small to mid-sized companies that really, really depend on great leadership because there's not as many of them as there would be in a large organization. And the work I do is really about developing current leaders as well as developing those future leaders so that there is a succession plan in place for all leaders so that there is a continuity within the organization should somebody exit and leave. Before that, I was running a technology consulting firm with my husband and made Inc. 500, fastest growing company, a lot of accolades. This was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. And actually started my career in finance back in the mid to late 80s. And that was working for a Fortune 500 company. So it was financial reporting, analysis, et cetera. So I've had a broad range of experiences, but for really the last 15 years, I feel like I've kind of found my purpose in life. It was a little late in life, but I found it, and I'm really, really enjoy working with leaders and getting them to have those kind of aha moments.
For sure. Well, I think they say better late than never, right?
Right, exactly.
Very good. Oh, I like that you're working on those leadership developments and succession planning. It's such a critical part for a lot of companies, and I think sometimes companies just don't spend enough time thinking about who's going to take the role if someone gets hit by a bus,
Exactly.
or better case scenario when they retire, right? But
Hmm.
a lot of companies kind of have that. What is it called? The experience gap, where people take all the experience with them when they leave, and then they're left
Yes,
with a troubling situation.
exactly. And that's the whole point of having good succession plans, that
Hmm.
you have that continuity of knowledge and skill sets. Yeah.
So, as we talked about, a lot of your work right now is focused on helping your clients with leadership during the pandemic. What does
Mhm.
that look like, and what are you having to dive into with your clients?
Well, it's changed in 6 months. The first couple 3 months was a little different than it is now. So when we first started into this challenging time, there was obviously a lot of confusion, anxiety, what's happening next. Some people felt like, well, we're going to get through this in a month and all will be good again. Clearly, that's not the case. And what I helped leaders do initially was help them in the communication aspect, communicating with their employees virtually versus face to face. And that meant more communication. It meant being very clear and transparent, because people wanted to know, what was the next step. And for small companies, were you going to be around? Whether you're going to have a job? There was a lot of anxiety in the workplace. So one of the things that I worked on was that emotional intelligence aspect, that leaders need to be able to read what is going on with their employees and be empathetic around what is going on. And each individual employee had something different. Some individuals, employees, might have been stuck in a studio apartment by themselves, while others were in a house with three young kids trying to school them while working. There were all different kinds of personal aspects that leaders needed to understand. So it was moving away from focusing on results first and focusing then instead on relationships first, and then moving to results. And since that time, it's been a more of a balance. The leaders have gotten to know their employees. They know who is being fearful, anxious, especially as we re-enter the workplace. And many of the smaller businesses are starting to re-enter. The larger ones, not so much, but the smaller ones are. And
Hmm.
they're doing it in staggered ways, where it might be one team in during one day and then another team in another day, that kind of thing, so that there's safety. Um, but that movement now is, how do we make sure that we keep our energy up? And leaders have spent a lot of time, especially those small to mid-sized companies, being anxious themselves. I mean, how am I going to finance my way through this challenging time? And how am I going to be able to make sure I care for my employees, not just emotionally, but financially? And the business leader, all of 9 times out of 10, all of them have a big portion of their wealth wrapped up in the company. So there's a lot of anxiety there. The the fact is that leaders need to take care of themselves before they take care of their employees. It's that self-care. One of the things that I've heard some people say was, well, that's being selfish. I'm like, no. Self-care is about caring for yourself so that you can be selfless with others.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes, it looks different to different people.
Yeah.
Some people want to just read for 30 minutes
Mm-hmm.
or take a walk. One of the things I recommend is, and I'm not doing it today, but standing at your desk versus sitting at your desk. Just small things like breathing, deep breath.
And I think what you said is actually such an important distinction, because I'm a big proponent of servant leadership and the idea of putting others' interests ahead of your own. But you can't give from an empty cup, right? And one of the things one of my past managers was very fond of saying was take time to sharpen your sword, which I can't remember what book he would get that from, but you probably know it better than I do. But he was fond of that saying, right? And taking the time, because you do have to spend the time to hone yourself and the time to give yourself the care, and whatever debriefing and de-stressing and decompressing that you need so that you can come and put your best foot forward for your team is hugely important. And it's not, as you said, it's not selfish. It's actually putting you in a position where you can continue to take care of the other people's interests.
Yeah, and one of the things I find some leaders have this misconception that caring for yourself is going to take lots of time. And there are small things that you can do that are take just minutes or seconds. Minutes, for instance, is doing some meditation for 10 minutes. I actually use the app Calm, and I do that every day now. I didn't before the pandemic. But I feel like that's one of those things that works for me and helps me calm myself before the day. And it's a great way that's the way I start my day. Others journal. Some people keep little gratitude jars, and they'll write something in and drop it in. They have it on their desk, and it doesn't take lots of time. It doesn't have to take an hour to go run 3 miles or 5 miles or whatever. You can do it in short bursts.
Absolutely. So what are the things that leaders need to focus on for their teams, and what are the things that they should do and what they should not do at times like this?
Well, the first is that communication, and to do more of it than you were used to doing in the past, and have a good mix of team and individual meetings. Some of the leaders that I work with have regularly had like one-to-one conversations with their employees, but it was maybe once a month. They're now doing it on a weekly basis, and it's a more regular check-in. And that check-in is not just about work, but personally as well. So it's that communication is really important. The other is to practice those key skills around emotional intelligence, like empathy and reading people's reactions. I mean, that's one of the things that is important, not to spend too much time communicating via Slack or email, but the Zoom. Now, granted, Zoom, there's the old Zoom fatigue that we hear about, but there's also the phone. A lot of people don't use the phone anymore. I'm amazed. It's either if they pick up the phone, they're texting or they're emailing, but they don't hit the dial button. And granted, you're not seeing the person, but you're hearing them, and you're hearing the tone. And there's more content that you're gaining from that conversation than if it were a text or an email. And it's also can be a lot more efficient. You're not going back and forth emailing 2 or 3 times. Just pick up the phone and talk to your colleague or employee. I heard a term recently, the virtual knock. And the virtual knock is, think about it as, being in a workplace, and you stick your head in the door and ask a question of one of your team members. Well, the virtual knock is using the phone as your knock. And the norm of the team is that if somebody in your team is calling you, you need to pick up the phone and answer it. Unless there's, obviously you're in the middle of something, then that's the first thing you do when you complete your task is pick up the phone and return the message. It's really valuable because you hear that tone and you can have that conversation. It may take 10 minutes, but think about an email that there's a string of emails going back and forth, and you're being interrupted each time versus chunking it into one 10-minute conversation. It's a lot more effective and efficient.
So we talked about practicing self-care. What are the other things leaders need to do as we continue to face the issues raised by COVID?
Have plan B, because we don't know what's going to happen. I'm sure the media will tell us what we think is going to happen, but none of us know. So, make sure that you've got a plan B in place, so that if you're already back in the office, what are the things that you're going to be looking at from a data perspective that will make you say, I need to move into plan B, and be clear to your employees what that looks like, because they're going to want to know.
Right.
So definitely have that plan B. And then don't forget to focus on the future. We're so laser focused on kind of today and next week in this world that we're in, but don't forget to have those planning sessions for next year and setting your goals for next year. Even though you may wonder, are we going to still be dealing with the pandemic? Set the goals and make sure that everybody is involved in that. One of the other things that I've recommended leaders do is rely on your team more. Don't put all of the pressure on your shoulders, but you've got a good team. Have them help you come up with solutions and plans.
One of the things you hear about a lot, and if you spend any amount of time on social media, particularly let's say Twitter, because it's because it's such a rapid fire communication platform, but we see a lot right now of as businesses begin to reopen and people who were remote working are now being asked to return to the office, and there's a lot of pushback and friction in that, whether it's whatever the concerns might be, or maybe someone's just more happy working at home. What can leaders do in that kind of a circumstance, and how do they work through that? Because obviously business needs to get back to normal, right, quote unquote normal, at some point. But what are we doing about this pushback?
Yeah, so you really, and I had a couple conversations recently about this with a couple leaders where they are re-entering, and there are a few people there that are pushing back, and understand why. What is really behind the pushback? Is it a health issue? Well, okay. Or is it something that is just an excuse? And they know, leaders know, if these individuals have been working for them before, they know the ones that are going to go above and beyond, and the ones that aren't. And that's when you have to make some decisions at some point as to is this person really on the right bus? Yeah.
Yeah, which is a tough position to be in. It's
Yeah,
exacerbated by the current situation.
right.
I think the
Exactly.
biggest thing is as you say, is understand the reason why.
Right. Exactly.
Still
What's
a lot of
really behind it?
fear and anxiety out there that drives a lot of behavior.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
What's really
absolutely.
behind it? Yeah. And then the other thing that I recommend is if those individuals have friends at work that might be able to influence them, you know, understand your team dynamics and who is influencing others. If there's somebody back at work who can influence others, encourage that.
So aside from the health and safety concerns, what else are leaders having to think about that they maybe didn't have to consider during pre-pandemic times?
Well, cash, cash flow. We've got the PPP that goes through, I don't know, year end or whatever, and then people have to start, depending on the situation, having to pay back, or they will, and others don't have to pay back. And I don't know the full details, but it's more that anxiety around capital that a lot of these small to mid-sized companies are having to deal with. Uh, yeah, yeah.
And we don't know when this is all going to be over, as you mentioned before, but could be quite some time before we attain some sense of normalcy. What does
Yep.
moving forward in that kind of uncertainty look like?
Um, Being flexible and agile, and be willing to make changes quickly when external factors are requiring you to be agile, and then obviously managing those changes quickly with your employees. Um, Clearly, it won't look like it did 6 months ago, because people are set up in their homes, and they've got space, and the technology is all set up, so there won't be that kind of rush. It'll be more of, okay, here's what we need to do, let's move back home, kind of thing. um, but be willing to to change as the factors change. Yeah.
One of my earlier podcast episodes, I talked a lot about leading in uncertainty and the idea of VUCA, which is the volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I was inspired greatly by a book called Leadership. Oh my goodness, Bob Johansson wrote this book. It's called Leadership Literacies, um, and it's about leading in an uncertain world.
Okay.
And so he talks about um, what are the characteristics that are required to be a good leader when you can't predict the future, when things are changing so rapidly, whether it's technology or a pandemic or the political environment and all kinds of things. There's so much complexity and everything. You can't really like go back 50 years and you could, with some reasonable degree of confidence, kind of look at the next several years and be like, yeah, these are probably the things that are going to happen.
Right. Mhm.
And now it could change, month to month, week to week, day to day. And some of the characteristics that he talked about was like essentially, having hope as a leader,
Yeah.
right? And having, confidence that things will work out despite how difficult it may be and what the outcome may look like. There is confidence that things will be okay.
Right.
Um, so, in that vein of thinking, what do you think, are required characteristics as we continue to go through this crisis?
I would think one of them is resiliency, to be able to bounce back. That determination, that kind of grit, is definitely required. The other, you brought up, was that hope, that kind of positive mindset versus that optimism that would be required, getting through any kind of difficult situation. those are the top two that come to mind for me. That optimism and resiliency.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so as we begin to wrap up, Beth, what is your key message to leaders, not just for leadership in this crisis, but in future crises that may arise?
Ooh, I think for crisis leadership, it's really about focusing on the future, but at the same time being in the present, being really mindful when you're talking to individuals about the specific situation, but at the same time not forgetting that there's a future and that we will get through it.
Absolutely. And a very important message, I think. So last few questions, we're wrapping up here. Beth, what is one thing you know about life or leadership that you wish everyone knew?
From a leadership perspective, I hope that people realize that leaders should be developing other leaders. That is really the core to leadership, is creating that future pipeline behind you that will allow you to grow and go on to another position because there's somebody behind you that's ready to take yours.
And I think of the quote, we don't need more followers, we need more leaders.
Yes.
So totally agree. When it's all said and done, Beth, what 3 words do you want to be used to describe your life?
Hopeful, curious, and fun.
Cool. What do those words mean to you?
Well, hopeful, I think about where we are today and the fact that, we've, as a society, we have gotten through a lot of worse. I think back to World War II. My grandmother and my mother lived through that, and there are things that are a lot worse, I believe, than what we're through right now. Curiosity. I'm a lifelong learner, and I'm always curious about things and people, cultures. I love to travel, and then fun. Obviously, for me, fun is travel, and that's kind of been put on hold. But I've figured out other ways to have fun. One of the things that I've been doing during COVID is I've learned how to make sourdough bread. And every weekend, I have a fresh loaf of sourdough bread.
Nice.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with fresh bread.
No, It doesn't last very long either.
No, I'll bet. Oh man, home baked goods. That's good. So tell us, Beth, where people can connect with you. You've got a book and some resources out there. So tell us a bit about that.
So my book, which is Are You Talent Obsessed, can be found on Amazon in either ebook or hard copy. And then my website, which is executive-velocity.com. Lots of free resources out there. I really encourage your listeners to go out there. I've got resources on hiring, leadership, and succession planning. And then they can also contact me through the website or through LinkedIn. And they can find me on LinkedIn at Beth Armknecht, ARMKNECHT Miller. I'm the only Beth Armknecht Miller on LinkedIn.
So I'll get those links in the detailed show notes over at my website, rashadoberlander.com. Connect with Beth, take a look at what she's doing. She's got some great resources, and it's been a real pleasure having you on the show, Beth.
It's been a pleasure, Rashad. I really enjoyed it.
Appreciate you taking the time today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, would you head over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, leave me a rating, leave me a review, and share this with a friend. It spreads the word and helps the podcast grow. You can also find me on social media at R.E. Oberlander. Until next time, stay awesome.